But I'm delighted to be joined in the studio now by Danny Kruger, the Conservative MP for Devizes, closely associated with the New Conservatives group, along with Miriam Cates. Lovely to see you this morning, Danny.
Morning.
I know you were following the news report there and sort of rolling your eyes at the treatment of Gideon Falter, the head of the campaign against antisemitism. I mean, what's your reaction to how the Met Police have been handling both his case as an openly Jewish man in a skull cap trying to make his way around London, and indeed the pro-Palestinian marches in general?
Well, I'm afraid it does justify what Suella Braverman was saying 6 months ago, along with a bunch of us, which is that the policing of the Palestinian marches represents a contradiction and a hypocrisy on the part of the police, who claim to be policing impartially. They do have a very difficult job. Let's acknowledge the reality on the ground. They're not trying to do the wrong thing, but they are doing the wrong thing. And I think that Suella was right then to be calling for a new law which would enable the government to insist that marches like this don't go ahead if there is a danger, as there is, as we've seen, of serious altercation. It's just totally wrong that any citizen, but particularly in the times we're in at the moment, a Jewish citizen should not be able to walk around London without being told by the police that his presence is a problem. And I understand they felt that because there was a danger of an altercation, of people on the march attacking him, and they were clearly threatening him. Well, the problem is them. The problem is the people on the march. And by the way, again, we should acknowledge that most people who are marching on these Palestinian marches are not angry or aggressive people, and they're just doing it in the cause of Palestine. I mean, I wonder why they don't have banners saying, denouncing Hamas. But nevertheless, let's allow that. But there is a significant contingent who are aggressive and militant and potentially violent against Jewish people. So on that ground, I think the marches should not be going ahead, certainly in the form they are. And the problem with that situation we saw was not the Jewish individual, it was the aggressive protesters who were threatening him.
And when you say that new legislation is needed, that's quite interesting, because we've sort of seen this to and fro between the government and indeed the Met. Government saying, you have the powers. I had Suella Braverman in your chair saying a few weeks ago, they have the powers, they're just not using them. But you actually think that we do need to have another law to
well, I think we might.
Ban them completely.
It's apparent that we need to clarify things, because the way the police justify the marches at the moment is that they say they can go ahead because there will not be the risk of danger of public disorder. That's only the case if they don't actually enforce the law. They allow people to chant and to display banners which should be illegal. In fact, really are illegal. I mean, they're deeply offensive.
If something's glorifying terrorism or inciting
hatred. So I agree with Suella that the police should be, I think, policing in real time the activity of the protesters. But I think it is also necessary, given the difficult state we're in, for Parliament to clarify that, unfortunately, I'm not proposing restrictions on free speech or the right of protest. I'm proposing restrictions on activity that is directly threatening to public order and indeed to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. It's not OK that Jewish people are not allowed into central London on a Saturday. I
mean, this playing sides, which was something that Braverman had accused the Met of some time ago and indeed led to her losing her job. How far do we sort of go on this? Because we've had Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, speaking to the Sunday Telegraph this morning, sort of saying that he can't quite understand why Jews are treated differently to other ethnic minorities. If you went to the far end of the wedge on being outspoken about this, you'd look to Illy Anderson's quotes before he defected to Reform, where he was basically saying, I don't actually believe that Islamists have got control of the country, but what I do believe is they've got control of Sadiq Khan and they've got control of London. Is that right? I mean, because clearly the policing towards people who are on the marches differs to those who are Jewish or seeming to provoke the marchers. So have we got Islamists taking over London? Do you agree with that analysis? Or what's at play here? Is it the police being politically correct and not wanting to upset people?
There's an unfortunate alliance. I don't think it's a deliberate one, so I don't accept that Islamists are somehow pulling the levers of London. But there is an unfortunate alliance between very radical people on the pro-Palestinian side of politics and progressive liberals who do run our institutions, including the police, who are afraid to challenge that first group. And so, unfortunately, they are in alliance. And what we have, I'm afraid, it's why I'm not particularly interested in the position of the Met, Mark Rowley. I think that probably I don't have confidence personally in him and in the leadership of the Met, but I don't think it's enough to simply say he should go. There is a problem with the culture of the police. Ultimately, that comes from the top, which is with the mayor who oversees them. I do think we have a genuine problem about the way the police regard these protests, which you see from the top, from him, through the commissioner, through the deputy commissioner who issued that absurd statement the other day, through to the officer on the ground the one who caused the offence by accusing this man of being Jewish. So all the way through we have a problem.
But I see what you're saying, but then it's slightly oxymoronic to say you don't have confidence in Mark Rowley, and then saying that it's a bit academic whether he goes or not. If you don't have confidence in him, then you must agree.
So I would like to see change. I'd like to see change from the top. I'd like the mayor to go. First thing to do is to change the police commissioner. Yes, but it's not enough just to change an executive. You have to change the culture of the organisation. If we just swapped him with another colleague who felt the same way, what would we have achieved?
Yeah.
We have, and I think this is a responsibility on government, which also has a role over the police. I'm pleased to say the Home Secretary and the Policing Minister are going to be challenging the Met this week about what's happened. We need to see a reset of the way the police regard these protests and, in fact, policing in London in general. So we have a genuine problem, and it's not enough just to create a scapegoat with the Commissioner.
Speaking of organisational change, does the Tory party need to change? I was quite intrigued that last week, sort of speaking to Conservatives on both sides of the party, this broad church of yours, more left-leaning Conservatives and also right-leaning Conservatives, agreeing at least on one thing. If the May elections are a disaster for Rishi Sunak, and indeed you lose Teesside and the West Midlands, then his position is once again going to be called into question. You might get more letters of no confidence and somebody else might be Prime Minister by the end of the summer. I mean, do you think there's a possibility of that?
Well, I guess there is. Again, at risk of ducking the question you want to ask me, I think the challenge for our party is about more than the leader. And I think Rishi's position is so difficult because we are a very split party. Let's just acknowledge that reality. I think there more unites us than divides us. We know what the real problem is with Labour and the Liberal Democrats. Nevertheless, we are divided about the approach to take. My view is that we should be leaning into that amazing coalition of voters that put us into power in 2019, rather than trying to rerun the 2015 election, which won us seats just in one corner of the country, really, and in the heartlands. I think there is a path to victory and to survival for our party, but it does require us to boldly and deliberately lean into that realignment and appeal to those voters in a way that, by the way, also appeals to voters in the Tory heartlands like the one I represent.
Although there does seem to be a bit of internal tension, even on the right of the party, between, say, your group, the New Cons, and Liz Truss's group, the Popcons. I mean, isn't this also sort of undermining this quest to unite the right, if the right itself can't even be united within the Conservative Party?
Listen, there are as many conservatisms as there are Conservatives, and we all have slight differences of emphasis. I mean, I think that, in fact, a lot of what Liz says I would agree with. A lot of what Suella or others on the right say I agree with. We have a particular agenda. We're all elected since the Brexit referendum. We all stand for Brexit and I say for this realignment. I think it's okay to have lots of different groupings. We all know the real problem, which is the threat of Labour. I think we're all committed to fighting them. And it's not just about uniting the right. We're in more agreement than we are with the other wing of our party. But even they, I think, all recognise we have a genuine problem, which is not the fact that we're losing voters to Labour. The problem is we're losing voters to Reform and to the stay-at-home, the people who don't want to vote for anybody. And we're all out campaigning, and we all get this the whole time on the doorstep and in our high streets, which is people say, they might say, I like you, the candidate. I'm always voted Conservative. I can't vote for you this time because I don't know what you stand for. And I just think we have a opportunity, because the reality is we do stand for something very, very coherent and, I think, attractive to the public. An agenda on defence, on tax, on crime, and on these questions around the culture that I think is where the country is. And actually, I think where the PM is as well. There is a problem with communication.
Because I think this is an interesting premise. I think it's an interesting premise for people watching and listening to this show to be of this mentality. I want to punish the Tories. I feel betrayed. I think they've betrayed us and our trust because they're not the Conservatives that we voted for. Some of their policies seem thoroughly unconservative, so I don't want them. But equally, I do agree that Labour would be even worse.
It is a problem.
So that's a massive problem. So are you saying that this is a problem of the Prime Minister not communicating a Conservative vision, or are you saying it's a problem of the Prime Minister because he's not right-wing enough? Or is it both?
Well, I think it's a problem of the party as a whole. We are divided on the way ahead. And by the way, I mean, I don't want to make excuses for our party because I'm being quite critical of our record in many ways. But I do think there's lots of things that we can point to in which we certainly have made the right calls and certainly have made a better fist of it than Labour would have done. So I don't think we have to be totally ashamed of our record in the way that many people accuse us, say that we should be. And I do think the way forward is to recognise where the essential bulk of the voters who we need to win are. They're the people who voted for us in 2019. They are patriotic people who have a common sense approach to life. They want a government to support them and get out of their way, not to be standing in their way. And there's a whole bunch of policy agendas that we are now doing on welfare, for instance, really important reforms coming down the line on that. I'd like to see us investing savings in defence. I think there's a clear dividing line with Labour about our attitude to our national defence and our armed forces. So I think we can do it, but there is a big challenge, and it is, I'm afraid to say, because too many people think that the way to govern is just to sort of maintain the status quo. The times call for radicalism. OK,
so radicalism would be changing leader. Well, who would do a better job?
Well, rather as I say about the Met, Camilla, it's not just about the individual.
But it is about leadership, isn't it?
It is about leadership.
You're not getting what you want from Rishi Sunak.
Well, listen, Rishi, I'm afraid, is caught between... tries to lead a party which doesn't want him to do what I think he would like to do himself.
But a better politician would show courage and communicate a really clear Conservative vision.
What the best thing to do would be for us all to unite around the agenda that is necessary. And that agenda is around the 2019 voter coalition. It's about being tough on defence, tough securing our borders, decent and compassionate, by the way, as well. A big part of this agenda, in my mind, is about investing in those local institutions, supporting frontline public servants, helping families, most of all, who are trying to do the right thing, particularly those with young children or disabled children. There's a huge agenda around reform and supporting the most vulnerable in our society that I don't think we are able to articulate enough because of so many other things that are going on. But we can, I think, convey to both centrist voters and to those voters who we've lost that we are the best party for the future and that Labour don't have the answers.
Really, really quick question because we're running out of time. Does Unite the Right mean perhaps you in the future working with somebody like Nigel Farage?
Well, listen, I think Nigel is a part of the Conservative family more broadly. What his actual role in it is for others. But yeah, I mean, I personally have no problem with him and I think that he should be part of the future story, but it has to be done in a way that holds our fractured coalition together.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning, Danny Kruger.